This is not a retreat, nor are we abandoning our Asian allies.
We're going down! America is under attack!
We are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
Ever wondered what Instagram Reels would look like as a HOI4 mod? Well, welcome to the Fire Rises, a total conversion mod set in the alternate 2020s where everything from COVID to Black Lives Matter spiraled 10 times further off the rails. Released in 2024, the mod exploded onto the scene. Hyper-extremist paths, a slick GUI, genuinely amazing soundtrack, and aesthetic overload. It was just undistilled LARP fuel. But despite its meteoric rise, the Fire Rises has had a rocky debut. And being new doesn't make you immune to criticism. So today, we're going to look at the positives and the negatives of a HOI4 mod that has left the community in awe. TFR's brand is simple, schizo paths and unapologetic chaos. Want to lead a satanic death cult? Sure. Bring back the Third Reich? Why not? Install an AI to rule China? Of course. That insanity is the appeal. It's the same formula that made TNO explode in popularity, the ability to roleplay as a completely deranged warlord in a collapsing world. HOI4 players love extremism because extremism creates the most intense narratives, and TFR understands that. It throws realism out the window in favour of spectacle and doesn't pretend otherwise. Now, some critics argue that the schizo tone reflects ideological extremism within the developer team, but outside of very specific internal controversies, that claim doesn't really hold up. The team itself is politically diverse, which is impressive considering the mod's modern setting forces it to constantly engage with real-world politics. TFR somehow manages to be political without openly endorsing a single modern ideology. That's a difficult balance, and they pull it off by making all of them look equally. And the argument that everyone who plays TFR is far right is lazy at best. You have people like the head of the HOI4 art server banning people for simply having their TFR server tag because according to them, everyone who plays it is a Nazi. But the reality is, the mod doesn't glorify extremism. It presents every faction as the hero of their own story. When you play a country in TFR, you see the world through their lens as a main character or protagonist. So it's not glorifying these specific ideologies, but rather making them the main character in their own story. Look, here's the real problem: replayability. TFR is linear, almost too linear. COVID happens, then the Saudi Civil War, then the Second American Civil War, then Taiwan, and then the First European War, so on and so on. You get it. You can practically predict the order every time. Europe almost always unites against Russia in the First European War, and the majority of the time, it loses to Russia. Then it also always flips ideologically based on Russia's path if they lose. Spain and France always have a civil war, with the winner tending to be the previous set ideology. The world feels dynamic, but structurally it isn't. Worse, every major country paths hinge on outcomes the player often cannot control. Germany and France, for example, who already have very similar gameplay paths, are heavily shaped by the result of the First European War and Russia's ideology. That kind of design severely limits player agency. Your experience becomes dependent on something external to your playthrough. And yes, that rigidity matches TFR's cinematic LARP style, but it also means that after 2 or 3 runs, you've essentially seen the script. America gameplay: win the Second American Civil War, restore your hegemony, and then invade the Western Hemisphere. It's different flags but with the same flowchart. No one wants to reread the same book forever, even if it's well written. The mod is young, and so more regional content could fix this. But as of now, replayability is TFR's biggest weakness and is not being meaningfully addressed. One thing TFR absolutely nails is immersion. The Arab-Israeli War, the Libyan Civil War, Saudi Civil War, it's got endless regional conflicts humming in the background. The writing is sharp, the GUI overhaul is clean, the soundtrack carries atmosphere perfectly. It's constant stimulation, constant spectacle, but here's the catch. Most of the sideshow content barely affects gameplay. Does it really matter who wins the Saudi Civil War? Not really. Does Gaddafi annexing Algeria meaningfully change your campaign? Barely. The world feels alive, but mechanically it's often decorative. It's immersion without any consequence. The mod's philosophy has shifted significantly over time. Under its original leadership, the focus was cleaner writing and fewer TNO-style decision minigames. After internal upheaval and the leadership transfer, the mod pivoted toward a more esoteric identity, introducing things like the catharsis and the cognoscenti. The writing improved dramatically, yet the gameplay philosophy had changed. Decision-heavy narrative mechanics, such as the cognoscenti, became more common. For some players, this deepened immersion. For others, it created the very fluff that TNO is criticized for clunky minigames with minimal strategic impact. But here's the difference. TFR isn't pretending to be a balanced grand strategy experience. The AI isn't particularly challenging. Combat isn't the selling point. TFR has embraced its identity as the LARP mod. The economy system and custom units are pretty solid, but nobody loads up TFR thinking, I can't wait for high-level competitive combat. They load it up for the story, and in that lane it thrives. TFR's development team is exactly what you would expect from a mod built on chaos. And internally, it has experienced more instability than some real-world governments. Even before release, leadership tensions were brewing. In October 2024, there were already reports that John Titor, the mod's creator, was being pressured to step down. He initially refused, but by January 2025, he relented and formally announced his resignation. What followed was less a transition of power and more a succession crisis. Developers describe a massive 30-person voice call. Cliques were formed within the team. There were reportedly 3 separate attempts to consolidate leadership before a temporary power-sharing agreement was reached before Czar, who would later become the most controversial figure in the mod's history, and Munchies. On paper, the arrangement was simple. Czar would handle public relations and administration. Munchies would oversee game development. In practice, it didn't last. Using his server ownership and administrative control, Czar sidelined rivals. Within weeks, Munchies and several major developers were removed. Even previously, vocal Russian teams went quiet. Development direction shifted rapidly. New developers, particularly from non-Western regions, were brought in as the project pivoted heavily toward Middle Eastern content. Preferential treatment followed. Then came the breaking point. Czar's attempt to monetize the mod ignited what became known as the TFR Civil War. Over 70 developers revolted. Control of the GitHub and the Steam Workshop page was captured by the revolters. The Discord reportedly descended into chaos. Moderation collapsed, random users were granted admin, and illegal content was posted. As the situation spiraled, further allegations emerged. Czar was discovered of using alternate accounts to influence mediation efforts. There was doxing of Czar himself, and it was circulated that Czar had contacted members of the Azov Brigade, a unit widely criticized for extremist associations, in an attempt to dox a Russian developer. Whether exaggerated or not, the damage to internal trust was catastrophic. Eventually, a new ruling council was formed. Head writer Novo became the de facto leader, and stability slowly returned. But instability always leaves scars. The team and the community as a whole continues to be rocked with the occasional crisis, such as when unrelated geopolitical events struck another blow. Members of the Chinese developer team were reportedly detained during a broader state crackdown on HOI4 modding communities by the Chinese government. Furthermore, it was recently revealed that Russian TFR team had a server with 18+ material, which was quickly shut down when the English team found out. This have not been a good look for the community. The result of all this chaos? A mod that has survived but not unchanged. TFR remains ambitious, popular, and creatively bold, but its development history is marked by volatility, some from internal factors, others from external factors, and volatility inevitably affects output. Despite everything, the chaos, the extremism, the instability, they all make the Fire Risers undeniably compelling. It has a gripping modern setting, exceptional atmosphere, and bold narrative ambition, along with a distinct identity. It rivals TNO aesthetically, it dominates true spectacle, and it understands its audience. But replayability remains shallow, internal instability remains a risk, and long-term direction is still quite uncertain. TFR is young and massively popular. That's both its greatest strength and its greatest danger, because from here on out, every single update matters. The Fire Risers has prospects that any aspiring modder could dream of. The question is whether it can keep burning, or will it burn itself out? Ever wanted to play TFR in your browser? Well, check out Pax Historia, an AI-powered alternate history, grand strategy, browser-based sandbox game. Players choose a nation at a specific point in time to rewrite history through interactive AI-driven storytelling, with options ranging from real historical scenarios to hypothetical events like alien invasions. Check them out in the description below.